James talking about these, and I'm just going to let him do so. So go ahead, James.
I think I'm actually going to talk about Kennedy.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. More than Winston. I've got another book that I'm almost finished that it's about World War II, World War One, and for some reason or other, the stupid chimp that put that book together, not this one, but the one I'm just finishing up, I've got about 35 pages left to go. 20 of those are just indexed. So 15 pages of the actual text. He precedes World War II and World War One with the Napoleonic Wars and the Revolutionary War on the continent, where the revolutionary armies of France went crazy and were attacking neighboring countries. So they already had gone crazy in France, and then they're going, hey, we're spreading the good news. It's just like the commies in Russia. They proceeded under Stalin particularly, but under Lenin too, having famines, not just drought, famine, and ethnic cleansing, genocide, and all that sort of stuff. And they just had to keep on spreading that gospel, all that good news, like basically evangelizing for ultimately some of the worst dictators in the history of the world. Stalin, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, and Pol Pot. The list is almost endless. And then there were the commie Nazis, Saddam Hussein, Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. One guy who didn't really get a chance to strut his stuff was Nelson Mandela. He was part of that type of gangster mentality. He made his movement in the ANC party was the spear of the party. And what's that about? Oh, I'm sure it was all peaceful. No. When he started doing that, I think somewhere around 1950, yeah, he was around a long time. Other people in the party, I'm not saying all the others, but some of them at least, were saying to him, well, look at Gandhi, he got independence. And it was right after Indians' so-called independence in 1947. Oh, Nelson Mandela, this is different. No, it wasn't different. The Boers eventually gave up, largely without a fight. Stupid. Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. He refused to renounce terrorism. Revolutionary terrorism goes back, at the very least, as a term to Lenin. That's not John Lennon. It's Lenin, otherwise originally known as, Vladimir Ulyanov. Some people say Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. Some people say Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, but no, Lenin was a term all by itself. So when you use those first two names, or his first name and his patronymic, use it with Ulyanov, okay? That was his real name. Lenin. Guy from the Lena River. I think that's what Lenin means. Something like that. That's where he was. Where he was sent for a while to cool his heels by the powers that be in Romanov administration. The Romanovs, the people are leading the Russian Empire, misleading. So we're going to talk a little bit about Contract on America, as put together by David. I've talked about it before, but I'm going to talk about it more and more. It's an important book, very important. It's really got more content than you'd suspect. It's about 400 pages. Well, look at this. It's over 450 pages. But a lot of it's small print, so it has an appendix, 2 sources on the Mafia, and it just goes and lists stuff the Mafia did. So the Mafia are the main movers and shakers behind Kennedy's assassination. Both Kennedys. We just can't get over it with JFK. I'm going to explain to you how I became a Kennedy assassination buff. I'm not a buff. I see things for what they are. Right? So I started working at the cop shop here in Lethbridge way back. What year was that? 95. It was not January the 1st because that was a holiday, but it was right after my holidays. They'd shifted me over for that year from City Hall. They were demolishing the old City Hall. The people that were at the City Hall were moved to various locations on a rental basis. I'm pretty sure it was various office spaces around the city, and until they put up the new City Hall. And that took quite a while. Anyway, I was shifted over, and I wasn't happy about that. I didn't want to work with cops. And I think I did a pretty good job, like I cut off my long hair and tried to fit in. I did, I was working undercover. Cops, I don't think, realized that I didn't talk too much right wing, but I certainly didn't talk left wing stuff. Yeah, when you're at work, you should really leave your political opinions behind. And I did. And, I had to put up with people saying some kind of goofy things, but cops will be cops. And, but my first day of work, it might have been the 2nd of January. Anyway, after the holidays were over, I turn up at the cop shop. I go in through the nearest door. As it turns out, it was the door where people went to enter to pay traffic tickets or make traffic complaints or whatever. So it wasn't really the front door, but I was just going to the nearest door. I turned up right at 4. Is that when my shift started? 3. It's for 3 to 11. Now, I went well past 11 almost every day because I gave the city free overtime. That's a different story. Anyway, 3. Right? That was my policy. Try to turn up right on time. And my first day, I made sure I was right on time. I didn't like giving them free overtime at the beginning of the shift. I didn't like giving them free overtime at the end, but I did it to keep people, particularly management or mismanagement people, as it turned out almost every case, off my back. So I turn up at 3. They're not going to let me in. I wanted to start my shift because I figured every situation I've been in with the city, except my first job, I had too much work to do, more than 8 hours work to do. So I wanted to get started. They weren't going to let me in. They said, "Oh, you got to produce ID." I never used to carry ID around. Just recently I lost my ID. Had to get it replaced. I didn't want to take that chance. I kept my ID at home. Well, they said, "You're not getting in here." I said, "Okay. What do I do if I want to get in?" And they said, finally, they said, "Do you know anyone who works here that can identify you as being who you claim you are?" I said, "Oh, there's this guy, Joe, who's supposed to be ending his shift coming up and working janitorial. And I'd worked with him before at the City Hall when he was just starting off, when he was wet behind the ears rookie." And they said, "Oh, go get Joe. Come on," this to someone. "Go get Joe. See if you can track down Joe. Joe has to come up stairs and identify me as who I am. Otherwise, I'm not getting in the cop shop." And it was just fortuitous. Somewhere along the line, I would have got the book used. Maybe I was just interested. I'm not sure why it was, but it was something claiming that J. Edgar Hoover was kind of like behind the assassination. A book claiming J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, before Kennedy came along and considerably after Kennedy was assassinated, was behind the assassination. That's just a ridiculous thesis. He was involved in one of the cover-ups, 2 cover-ups. Okay. The first one managed, well, there were 3 actually. Well, we'll say 2. There was one by the Mafia, and that involved killing people. And there's the other one that was orchestrated by JFK, LBJ, J. Edgar Hoover, and Robert Kennedy. I don't know if Robert Kennedy actually was involved in orchestrating it, but he went along with it. Yeah, that's JFK's brother. No, the whole thing was they didn't want the mob plot to come to fruition, which was the whole idea, was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Whack Kennedy, blame it on right-wing Cubans. Really, it was some of the Cubans. There were some Cubans involved. Blame it on left-wing Cubans, but it was right-wing Cubans that were involved. And so the pressure would have been on, hey, like the Fidel Castro and his agents whacked JFK, and now we've got to invade Cuba and whack Fidel Castro, do whatever with him. And there was no way LBJ, with an election coming up, that's what Kennedy was doing in Dallas. He already started his campaign for the next year. It was November the 22nd. When he was assassinated in Dallas, he'd already put in an appearance, I think that one, in Tampa or somewhere in Florida, maybe Miami, and in Chicago, or he was going to. I think the one in Chicago, the parade was canceled because a plot to assassinate, and it would have been a mafia plot, the same dudes that eventually got to Kennedy, were going to try to kill Kennedy in Chicago. I believe Chicago, or the one in Florida, was detected, and they just didn't have the parade, Kennedy's parade. Anyway, I got hold of this book, and it had some details. It wasn't just wild-eyed speculation about J. Edgar Hoover. And so J. Edgar Hoover was involved in the cover-up, but he has nothing to do with the actual assassination. He was like this with the Mafia, he was, but no, he was just following his orders from LBJ when it came to the cover-up. LBJ didn't want the assassination of Kennedy to be an election issue. We've got him saying that on tape. He taped himself. This is before Kennedy taped himself. This is before Nixon taped himself. So there was some detail, a little bit of detail. And this important little bit of detail, I hadn't realized it because I was kind of not terribly interested in the Kennedy assassination up to that point in time. So this is, like I said, 1995. So this is over 30 years after the assassination. And I wasn't a young pup anymore. I just turned 95. I would have just turned 40. So as a teenager, hot-headed 20-year-old or something like that. Okay? Not that I ever was a hot-headed 20-year-old. Anyway, I find out, where did Kennedy get assassinated? Where? Or not Kennedy. Lee Harvey Oswald. He was assassinated too. Where the hey was he assassinated? That's a key. Well, really, that key. Here we go. See? Look at here. Get a little picture of Lee Harvey Oswald. Apparently, it was just one shot. Jack Ruby knew exactly what he's doing. See how they say that with handguns, you have to get as close, pretty well, as with a knife to kill someone, to make sure you kill someone. See how close he is? But, you'll see a police guy there. These guys are maybe sheriff's officers. This guy's handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald. This guy wasn't in on the plot. Look, he's kind of surprised. He was on someone's spit list, and yeah, I'm using rhyming slang there. And there's another guy's got the sheriff kind of hat on. Jack Ruby's got the mafia type of fedora there. Probably dressed to kill. Much like old Blue Eyes Frank Sinatra would. Another guy who used to hang with the mafia. But, you know, Ruby didn't hang with the mafia. He was mafia. Apparently he hailed from Chicago. And he was a late contemporary of a guy called Al Capone. And the story goes, and I suspect there's a lot more than just fiction to the story, that Jack Ruby used to run errands when he was a young pup for Al Capone. Fun times. Real fun times. Here we go. But where is this? It's in the Dallas police station. How the hay does a guy who's hung with Al Capone was hanging? This is documented. Capone thing could be a story, but he was hanging with one of the two Dorfmans, maybe both of them, in Chicago before he came to Dallas. A long and strong record of at least ties, but basically being in the mafia. Jack Ruby, and he ends up lugging up Pete's loaded in the Dallas police station. Okay, folks, as soon as I read that, 41 years old, you know, my IQ was a little bit higher than 41. Anyone who knows that and doesn't realize that the fix was in, their IQ is below 41. Their effective IQ at least below 41. You don't get into a police station on a regular day. Can you imagine how boring January the 2nd here in Lethbridge would be? 1995? I wasn't getting in that police station without some sort of identification. How does a member of the mafia, at the very least, an associate of the mafia, get into the Dallas police station when they've got maybe the most notorious suspect in the history of the Dallas police force up to that point in time, and possibly into the infinite future? Lee Harvey Oswald. They've got him there, and they let Jack Ruby with a gun, with ammo, in there. Wow, fix is in. Now, you know, like, this is the classic photo of the assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald. This is the clue. You can't get it from this. You can't get anything. Okay? But, you know, one of the clues as to who's involved in the plot, it wasn't just mafia people. There's supposed to be a guy leading these three folks, Lee Harvey Oswald, and these two sheriff dudes or whatever they are. And the guy who was supposed to be leading them isn't in the picture frame. Huh? What's that? He was the head of the, kind of glitching on the name, but he was the head of the Dallas police force, homicide and robbery, I believe, division or department or sub-department. And he's supposed to be right in front of Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, maybe he's leaving a little bit of room, so they've got photographers on both sides of the hallway here, stuff like that. Well, it's kind of like here, stuff like that. But, you know, he should be in front of him. But you'll see that he's in front of him, and then he starts to strafe. Why is that? Well, the fix is in. Would you want to be in the way of Jack Ruby lugging a gun when you know Jack Ruby's going to be there? You're going to be scramming. Now, get on the internet and check the Zapruder film. Zapruder, Zapruder film. Okay? Now, it's probably the FBI, but someone with some sort of technical expertise messed around with that footage. So they made it so, for example, it looked as though Kennedy's head didn't jerk backwards when it got the headshot. and stuff like that. Obviously, from the in front, it'll be the grassy knoll. To the back and to the left, grassy knolls to his front and right. So they messed around with that, made that disappear. But you know, almost as important is there was a lead car in that parade, and it wasn't Kennedy's car. When you look at the footage from what you can get of the Zapruder film, you would suspect that the lead car is Kennedy's car, but it's not. It's a hardtop car. It's not a limousine. Could be a reason for that. It's the sheriff, or it's the police chief's car. What was his name? Jesse Curry or something like that. He's not in the frame. They've cut it out so you don't see that he's leading it. And most importantly, you're not seeing it. He's leading it by a mile because the fix is in. He knows what's going to happen. Now, sure, he's got a hard top, and like they could have rented a Thunderbird or something like that for Jesse Curry to be waving at the crowds. He wouldn't want that because the fix was in. He knew. And I don't know if he was driving, but he or his driver were hightailing it out of there before bullets started flying around. And whoever was responsible for doctoring that tape was responsible for stripping that out of the Zapruder film. You think Zapruder would just turn the camera on at the very last second? Now he's watching the thing. Or turned it off for a while. They're showing it up, coming up, what is it, Houston Street, and turning on Elm Street. It'll show there, but there's a cut in. It'll show us them coming up Houston Street, as I recall. And then there's a cut when it's coming down Elm Street, because they don't want you to see. They didn't want it then. And whoever's holding it back, I don't know, Trump released some stuff. But, the amount of stuff on Lee Harvey Oswald, for example, in CIA records, other records, just keeps ballooning. According to the Warren Commission, there was nothing, no connection. Lee Harvey Oswald with the spy community. And now we're finding, they've got to keep stuff back. Why? There wasn't supposed to be any stuff, according to the Warren Commission. And yet there's tons of it. I don't know how many pieces. And they're releasing stuff. Lord knows how many, tons of stuff. They're releasing it. Lord knows how much stuff actually got destroyed. There's tons of stuff. Lee Harvey Oswald, he defected to the Soviet Union. There'd be all sorts of records. Now, of course, he was set up by probably the Office of Naval Intelligence. Maybe he was loaned out to the CIA when he did that. It was an attempt to get someone in the Soviet Union. Oh, here's a defected Marine. Well, how many Marines would defect to the Soviet Union? Exactly -1. Marines aren't that type. You get idiots like Paul Robeson or something like that. Useful idiots. Maybe Pete Seeger might have been tempted at one time or another. No, another musician. I wonder if there's a... Maybe James Baldwin. I don't know how far left, crazily left he swung. Who knows? So the Russians knew. The only way Lee Harvey Oswald got to stay in the Soviet Union, they didn't want to let him in. And he faked committing suicide. I think he slashed his wrist. No, they were forced to keep him there. And they sent him to a dumpy place called, I don't think it's that dumpy, but it would have been considered kind of provincial, a place called Minsk, the capital of Belarus, one of the so-called 15 republics of the Soviet Union. I've been there. When I was on tour in Minsk, they actually showed me the apartment building where Lee Harvey Oswald stayed. But the Russians knew exactly what was happening. Why? You'll see pictures in books, and I don't think it's ever emphasized. When you were in Russia, you would never hang with a foreigner, particularly from the United States. Why would you tempt the KGB? Yeah, I know it's Khrushchev, but Lord only knows what could happen to you. You could end up in a basement in the wrong building down near the Kremlin, downtown Moscow. Maybe be subjected to a little bit of psychological torture, maybe a little physical torture, just to keep you honest, all that sort of stuff. Now, you wouldn't hang with them. All sorts of pictures. Nice looking people, women in bikinis or swimsuits. There's one guy, his best friend, Oswald's best friend. Man, oh man, he looks like a movie star. Yeah, right. They're all KGB agents. And he ends up marrying a woman over there who was a relation to, I think, a KGB officer. And her name ended up being Marina Oswald. Anyone who doesn't realize that she was a KGB agent is just off in La La Land. Why was Lee Harvey Oswald hard to hire out when he got back to the United States? He came back, decided to come back. Well, his handlers, or would-be handlers too, in the United States would be looking at him, what? You married someone over there and you didn't realize that she was a KGB agent. Then you bring her back here. We're not hiring you because she'll be sending stuff back about what you're doing for us to the Soviet Union. Are you nuts? No. He always wanted, apparently, to be a spy. His favorite TV show was about a spy way back when. I don't know what the show was called, but he was really not a very good spy. Here he brings back a spy married to him. He can't get rid of her. Ends up having a kid, 2 kids, I think, with her. Wow, that's amazing. So she's hanging around with a woman, I can't remember her name, Priscilla Johnson or some McMillan or something like that, in Irving, Texas, staying in her place. And, people were saying, well, she looks like a CIA agent. And, of course, there were all sorts of denials by the usual deniers who were going around looking for JFK assassination buff/wingnuts. And they're saying, oh, no way, but then it turned out, yeah, she was a CIA agent. What else do you expect? Here's this woman and they'd be keeping tabs, and what better way of keeping tabs? Lee Harvey Oswald was kind of split up with his wife, or splitting up, and so, wow, the CIA agent moved, hey, let's help you. You move in with me. I'll be keeping tabs on you. Thank you. Yeah. And this works out. But it's mafia. Mafia, don't get fooled by this stupid Stone. Who was this? That guy who did JFK movie. Irving Stone. Anyway, whatever his name is. Oliver Stone. There we go, Oliver Stone. Don't get in this. The CIA there were certain elements, small number from what I can tell, of CIA elements who were involved in the assassination. What was it? E. Coward Hunt. And there'd be a few others. I think Hunt was maybe the highest up it went. And that was fairly high. I think he was very high up in the American embassy, a CIA agent in the American embassy in Mexico City, back in the day. But yeah, so we're going to look at some of the. Now, think about how many mafia people that you've had on the phone. Mafia people that you've had on the phone or contacts with or whatever in your whole lifetime, much